Hey everyone. First of all, I loved this book and I loved reading it because it's been on my list for forever. And so I'm so glad that this class gave me a chance to finally read it. It's used in my church a lot for just talking about racial reconciliation and justice. So um, glad I finally got to read it. As for the commingling of justice and community and theology within the civil rights movement and within reconciliation movements, I think it seems to me that the best traditions here involve all three, and the ones that are have the most breakdown don't, or only involve one of them. So definitely you see in Martin Luther King Jr.'s story, you see his conversion, not his conversion, but like his come to Jesus moment at the kitchen table, which I think is such a beautiful um, moment in shifting his theology, because he had all of this background and all of this deep, heady theology, and he thought he knew the best method of descent through Reinhold Niebuhr's theology, and you just see how this radical encounter with the living Christ reoriented him towards developing his own really theology of justice, and learning from Gandhi and um, taking pieces of that, but really leaning into nonviolence and how that shaped the community around him. Even the front porch story about people getting kind of like riled up, and he's saying like, we need to love, we need to choose love. And so just his preaching, how he vocalized his theology, moved people into deep community and into working for justice. And so I do think Martin Luther King Jr. was more theology driven than maybe community um, driven, obviously justice driven, but um, the local communities that you see spring up later were more as a result of things that seems like Martin Luther King Jr. just kind of like paved the way for more of those local communities to form. Um, and then you see with the SNCC, um, you see this like community based, deep love for justice. The theology piece is there because people are bringing it with them individually, but that isn't as much the foundation as local community and justice and fighting for justice. But then, so they had these like, and some theological basis, which starts to like leave the movement as more people come in with different opinions on what justice looks like and what like a non-Christian secular, I guess, view of justice would mean, and what that, and we still see that so much today, but it just seems like in this chapter and then moving into the next chapter, that justice becomes disengaged from community and theology, which just leaves it in this, just feels like it's in this existential void at that point, like especially in the late 60s after Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated, and like the early 70s. I think the fourth chapter is titled like something about a hallucination. How it turned into a hallucination from a dream. So it was no longer this like tangible good thing we were reaching for. It was this hallucination of something that was impossible to grasp, and no one quite knew what justice meant, and there was infighting, and which is a typical piece of community. So that in itself was maybe a stage of the civil rights movement, in that there needs to be this, sorry, I have a cold. There needs to be this space for conflict, but the conflict really ate away, and the SNCC died and really didn't accomplish its mission. And it seems to me that a large part of that was disengaging from first theology, the theology of the incarnate Christ, and then disengaging from true community and reconciling community, and a community that's grateful and hospitable to one another, and don't need to agree all the time. So that just seemed really messy and like a place where all this was falling apart. And then you see John Perkins bring in this community piece more than it seemed like a lot of people had done, and more so than Koinonia in chapter 2, because John Perkins really had to wrestle through hatred, and come out the other side and choose forgiveness, which was something that most of the white people on the Koinonia farm had no need to do. And so I met John Perkins, and was actually I got to be like a student at one of his like week-long things. And so like just hearing him talk and seeing the mission of what they're doing in Jackson, and I saw like a lot of the downfalls too at this point. Like there had been backlash from what he was doing, and they could kind of see the holes, but the community-based piece was crucial. And it's neat to see how he went in with spiritual intentions, which really turned into a desire to see justice. But really his theology was shaped all the way through his life. He didn't really maintain the same theology. And you kind of see that in Martin Luther King Jr.'s life, how community and justice shape a theology over time. Now I'm just kind of rambling, but just interesting to see how John Perkins changed his mind. He was super fundamentalist to begin with, and then he kind of backpedals, and yeah, all ties together. The thing is, I think with like my church currently, I've had multiple conversations about this in the last couple of weeks. Had a conversation with a friend today just about what does reconciliation look like now. We've seen, we have a diverse church. My church is incredibly diverse. My pastor, Rich Nathan, has done, he just had a vision for a multicultural church and for racial reconciliation. And my church really embodies that, but we're a diverse church. I wouldn't say we're a reconciled church. And I think we, the younger generation, my generation of pastors and leaders, are really wanting to take that baton that we've managed to have a multi-ethnic, multiracial, very diverse church, but we haven't really done the work of reconciliation. And so what does it look like to bring in that? The theology is, we have our theology, we are seeking justice. Like we're a church that really seeks justice. So what does it look like to maybe be in smaller communities where we're truly reconciling to one another? Because I really believe it's like you just see it in the groundwork of what John Perkins was doing, what other people have been doing across America in racial reconciliation. And it can be kind of sad to think about how slow that movement is, but I'm blessed to be at a church that already has people together in one place. And so, what can we do to move this forward? And yeah, it feels like a really special place to be. But we're all of my friends who are all different races of people. We're just trying to figure out what's next. Like, what do we do with all of this? And this book didn't answer that for me. It felt like it talked about inner city development and moving into neighborhoods, but there wasn't really a game plan for like what happens when you're all in one church together and you've got all the bodies in one place and you've done that work. But now you actually need to like reconcile and be like really do the work inside the church. And so feels a little overwhelming, and also like there's not, I think we're all struggling to find a blueprint for what this looks like. So any thoughts would be welcome.